"Pick your woman," the sheriff said. 4 chained girls stand in the dust as the church bell tolls. The crowd jeers, boots scrape, and iron keys jangle. But then, before the sheriff can strike, the dealer giant Apache steps forward. With one pull, he snaps the chains of the youngest Comanche girl, and the whole street falls silent. This isn't just defiance. It's a war cry against crooked law, false justice, and the greed that feeds on stolen lives. The girl refuses to run, clinging to the man who once spared her people. Together, they vanish into the mountains, pursued by a sheriff hungry for blood, and hiding a secret darker than any badge should bear. As snow falls and guns thunder, one question burns hotter than the flames of the shack set ablaze. When the law is a lie, will courage and mercy be enough to set her free? Your reactions reaffirm something simple, yet powerful, that stories still shape us, even in silence. If you believe in the soft endurance of love, truth, and doing what's right, then you're exactly why these stories exist. The sun beat mercilessly on the wooden platform in Los Trigos town square, its harsh rays reflecting off the tin roof of Mason's general store. Dust devils swirled through the crowd of restless onlookers, their boots scuffing the hard-packed earth. The air felt thick with tension and the sour smell of unwashed bodies pressed together in the heat. For Comanche, girls stood in chains on the raised platform, their faces streaked with dirt and quiet dignity. Sheriff Morton strutted before them like a rooster in a henhouse, his badge gleaming as bright as his oiled mustache. His voice carried across the square, dripping with false authority. "Step right up, gentlemen. Tick your woman, all properly seized under territorial law." He gestured to the captives with a theatrical flourish. "Got some fine workers here. Young, strong, and already broke to civilization." At the edge of the crowd, Tyon's jaw clenched tight. His massive frame towered over the townspeople, who gave him a wide berth. The weight of his Army Scout medal felt like a burning coal against his chest. 10 years of tracking his own people had left deep furrows in his weathered face, but nothing had prepared him for this mockery of justice. The youngest girl, Naya, caught his eye. Though her wrists were raw from the iron shackles, she held her chin high. There was something familiar in the set of her shoulders, the quiet strength in her stance. Memory stirred. A night raid 3 summers past, when he'd led a cavalry patrol past a hidden camp, claiming the tracks went another way. He'd seen her then, just a child helping the elders escape. Sheriff Morton's voice cut through his thoughts. "What you staring at, half savage? These goods ain't for your kind." The sheriff spat, the glob of tobacco juice landing near Tayon's boots. "Unless you got proper papers saying otherwise." The crowd's nervous titter died as Tayon moved. Steps were deliberate, each one eating up the distance to the platform with the unstoppable force of an avalanche. The wooden steps groaned under his weight. Up close, Morton seemed to shrink, though he kept his sneer firmly in place. Without a word, Tayon reached for Naya's chains. The links were sturdy iron, meant to hold against desperate struggle, but Tayon's hands, calloused from years of bow and rifle, wrapped around the metal like it was nothing more than dry kindling. His muscles bunched beneath his faded cavalry shirt, the chain snapped with a sharp crack that echoed off the false-fronted buildings. Women gasped. Men muttered and reached for weapons. But Tayon paid them no mind, his dark eyes fixed on Naya. As he gently pulled the broken shackles from her wrists, Naya's eyes widened with recognition. She pressed close to his side, her voice barely a whisper in Apache. "Brother of the mountains, you spared my grandmother's camp." Her small hand gripped his sleeve. "I remember your shadow passing in the night, leading the soldiers away." "Sheriff." Morton's face flushed purple. "Now see here. That's government property you're tampering with." He fumbled for his revolver, but the holster caught on his gun belt. This here's a legal auction authorized by territorial statute. There is no law. Tayon's voice rumbled like distant thunder that makes the selling of children right. Each word fell heavy as stone in the dusty silence. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded, though they quickly looked away when Morton glared in their direction. Others fingered their gun belts, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Tayon turned, placing his broad back to the sheriff. With gentle pressure on Naya's shoulder, he guided her toward the platform steps. The girl moved with quiet grace, her bare feet making no sound on the worn wood. Stop right there. Morton had finally freed his revolver. One more step in aisle, but Tayon and Naya were already moving through the crowd, which parted like water around a boulder. The sheriff's threats echoed behind them, becoming just another sound in the hot afternoon. No more meaningful than the buzz of flies or the creak of windmills. Turning in the distance, they walked straight down the center of the dusty street. Past the hitching posts where horses stamped nervously, past the shuttered windows where curious faces peered out. Naya's steps grew stronger with each yard of distance from the platform, though she kept close to Tayon's protective bulk. The remaining 3 Comanche girls watched them go, hope warring with fear on their faces. The crowd's angry murmuring grew louder, but no one made a move to stop the unlikely pair. Even Morton's shouted threats seemed to lose their power in the shimmering heat. "This ain't over." The sheriff's voice cracked with rage. "You hear me, Scout? This ain't over by a long shot." But Tayon and Naya kept walking, their shadows stretching long across the packed earth. The sun beat down, the dust swirled, and lost Trigos watched in stunned silence as law and justice parted ways on that sweltering afternoon behind them. The sound of Morton's threats faded into the general noise of the town, wood creaking in. The heat, horses nickering, and the eternal wind that swept across New Mexico territory, carrying change on its dusty wings. The real battle, they both knew, was just beginning. But for now, each step took them further from bondage and closer to whatever freedom they could carve from this harsh land. The other captive girl's chains clinked softly in the breeze, a reminder of work yet to be done. But Tayon kept his pace, steady, his hand gentle on Naya's shoulder as they made their way through the heart of Los Trigos. Sometimes, he knew, the biggest journeys had to start with a single act of defiance. Sheriff Morton burst through the doors of the Thirsty Miner saloon, his face flushed with rage. The usual afternoon card players looked up from their tables as his spurs jingled across the wooden floor. "I want every able man." His voice boomed off the smoke-stained walls. "That Apache turncoat's gonna learn what happens when you steal from the law." He slammed his fist on the bar, making the glasses rattle. $5 a day to any man joins my posse. We ride within the hour. Meanwhile, across town, Tayon led Naya through the side door of Walker's livery stable. The building's interior was cool and dim, filled with the sweet smell of fresh hay and leather. Dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight that filtered through the wall slats. "You must go north," Tayon said quietly, checking the street through. "A gap in the boards. Your people will be camped near the buffalo grounds this season." Naya shook her head firmly, her dark eyes reflecting the determination that had caught his attention on the auction platform. "I remember you, brother of the mountains. 3 summers ago, when the blue coats came, you led them past our camp. The old ones still speak of the tall Apache who showed mercy." Tayon's scarred hands clenched. "That was different. I cannot protect you now. The Comanche are scattered and hunted," Naya replied, her voice steady despite her youth. "The soldiers watch all the trails north. I would be captured again before reaching the buffalo grounds." She touched his arm gently. "I choose to stay with one who has shown kindness." A horse whickered softly in its stall. Tayon's expression remained stern, but something shifted in his eyes. The girl's trust weighed on him like his old Army Scout medal, a burden he hadn't asked for, yet couldn't ignore. The stable boy's footsteps on the hay-strewn floor made them both tense. But the young man just nodded, deliberately looking away as he worked. Not everyone in Los Trigos agreed with the sheriff's ways. As the sun began its slow descent behind the western mountains, Tayon made his move. He selected 2 horses, a sturdy bay gelding for himself and a gentle sorrel mare for Naya. His hands moved swiftly, securing saddles and checking cinches with the efficiency of long practice. "Leave money," Naya whispered, pulling a few coins from a hidden pocket in her dress. Tayon nodded, placing the silver dollars on a wooden beam. Where they would be found, they led the horses out the back of the stable just as the evening church bell began to toll. The sound carried across town, mixing with the day's last activities, doors shutting, children being called in, the blacksmith's hammer falling quiet. Already, gossip was spreading through Los Trigos like wildfire. Outside the general store, Mrs. Henderson clutched her shawl tight as she spoke to the minister's wife. Stealing property in broad daylight. Whatever is this territory coming to? But at the dressmaker's shop, old Sarah Miller thought differently as she swept her porch. Ain't right, selling children like cattle. Maybe the good Lord sent that Apache to teach Morton a lesson in Christian charity. Tayon and Naya mounted up as the first purple shadows of dusk crept between the buildings. The horses' hooves kicked up small clouds of dust as they rode east, away from town. Behind them, they could hear Morton's voice carrying on the evening air, calling men to join his posse. They rode hard until full dark settled over the land, the horses breathing steady beneath them. Finally, Tayon guided them down into a dry arroyo where the steep banks would hide their camp from searching eyes. The spring that once ran here had dried up months ago, leaving only scattered pools between the rocks. "Sleep," Tayon said, helping Naya down from her horse. "I will take first watch." But Naya didn't lie down immediately. Instead, she sat wrapped in the blanket Tayon had given her, her face turned up to the stars. Softly, almost too quiet to hear, she began to sing. The Comanche lullaby floated on the night air, its gentle rhythm speaking of mothers and safety and home. Tayon stiffened as the melody wound through his memories. His sister used to sing that same song before the fever took her 15 winters ago. He had almost forgotten the tune, but hearing it now brought back her face with painful clarity. He moved a few paces away, positioning himself where he could watch the arroyo's rim while still keeping Naya in sight. The night wind carried sounds. From far off, an owl's hunting cry, the yip of coyotes, and something else that made him frown. Hoofbeats, still distant but moving with purpose. Naya's song faded to silence, but its echoes seemed to linger in the shallow canyon. She curled up in her blanket, trusting him to keep watch. Her steady breathing soon joined the night's quiet sounds. Tayon settled in for his vigil, his rifle across his knees. The posse would be following their trail, reading sign by lantern. Light, Morton wasn't the type to give up easily, especially when his pride was wounded. But neither was Tayon the type to break faith with those who trusted him, no matter the cost. The stars wheeled slowly overhead as he listened to the approaching riders. He had spent too many years tracking his own people for the army. Now, finally, he was using those same skills to protect instead of hunt. It felt like stepping onto a new trail, one that might lead to redemption or death. Only time would tell. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in soft pink and gold as Tayon broke camp. He had kept watch through the night, listening to the distant movements of Morton's men as they searched the wrong canyons. Now was their chance to move. "We must ride," he said quietly, touching Naya's shoulder to wake her. She stirred beneath the rough blanket, her young face showing the strain of yesterday's flight. The horses nickered softly as Tyon tightened their cinches. The bay gelding stamped impatiently, but Naya's sorrel mare stood quiet, sensing her rider's weariness. Tyon lifted Naya onto her mount, noting how the girl's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the reins. "You are tired," he observed, swinging up onto his own horse. "But we cannot stop until we reach the mountains." Naya straightened her back, trying to hide her exhaustion. "I can ride." They set out as the sun crept above the horizon, heading toward the dark line of mountains in the west. Tyon led them along shallow arroyos and through stands of juniper, choosing paths that would hide their tracks. He glanced often at Naya, seeing how she swayed in the saddle. "Here," he said, after an hour. Reining in beside her, "Watch how I sit." He demonstrated, settling low and loose in his saddle. "Let your body move with the horse. Save your strength." Naya copied his posture, and her riding grew smoother. "Like this?" Tyon nodded. "Good. The horse knows its work. Trust it." The morning wore on, the sun climbing higher as they pushed westward. Near a waterhole, they encountered their first test. 3 ranchers were watering their horses, rifles prominent on their saddles. The men's faces hardened when they spotted Tyon and Naya. "Up there." The oldest rancher called out, his hand dropping to his gun. "Them's Sawyer's horses you're riding." Tyon kept his voice calm and steady. "No, we are traveling kin, heading to visit family." He gestured to Naya. "My sister's daughter. We bought these horses fair in Las Vegas." The ranchers exchanged glances, clearly suspicious. But Tyon's massive frame and steady gaze made them hesitate. The youngest rancher whispered something about Apache scout and army tracker. The old rancher spat into the dust. "Well, just keep moving then. We don't want no trouble here." Tyon touched his hat brim in acknowledgement, and they rode past slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. Naya kept her eyes down until they were well beyond the waterhole. "You called me your sister's daughter," she said softly. "It was a useful truth," Tyon replied. "My sister would have been proud to claim you." By midday, dark clouds were building. Over the mountains, the air grew heavy with the promise of rain, and thunder rolled in the distance. Tyon scanned the landscape, knowing they needed shelter before the storm hit. An old line shack appeared ahead, tucked against a rocky hillside. The door hung crooked on leather hinges, and the roof had patches of missing shingles, but it would serve. Tyon dismounted to check inside, finding it empty except for a broken cast-iron stove and a few rusted tin plates. "We will wait out the storm here," he announced, helping Naya down from her horse. She stumbled slightly, stiff from the long ride. While Tyon tended to the horses, Naya proved her worth. She gathered armfuls of sagebrush, working quickly as the wind began to rise. Inside the shack, she cleared away debris and arranged the kindling near the stove. "The pipe is not broken," she said when Tyon entered. "We can have a small fire, if you think it's safe." He nodded, impressed by her practicality. Smoke will be hidden by the storm. They shared a meager meal of jerky as rain began to drum on the roof. Water dripped through the holes, but Naya had already placed the tin plates to catch the worst leaks. The sound made a strange music in the dim shelter. "When I was captured," Naya said suddenly, breaking their silence, "I was taken to the mission. School," she touched the cross hanging from a leather cord around her neck. "The sisters there were kind. They taught me to read English words." Tyon grunted, remembering his own bitter schooling as a scout. "I have a dream," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "To build a school where Comanche children and settler children can learn together. To read, to write, to understand each other's ways." Her eyes shone in the dim light. "If we know each other's hearts, how can we stay enemies?" Tyon scoffed. "A foolish dream. The settlers will never allow it." "Some will," Naya insisted. "The sisters taught me that God's love knows no boundaries." Why should learning? Her words stirred something uncomfortable in Taeyeon's chest. He had spent too many years caught between worlds, trusted by neither side. Yet here was this girl, despite all she had suffered, still believing in bridges instead of walls. The storm raged through the afternoon, but as dusk approached, the rain softened to a gentle patter. Taeyeon stepped outside to check their surroundings. The wet air carried scents of sage and wet earth, and the clouds were breaking up to the west. Movement caught his eye, distant riders silhouetted against the sunset. Even at this range, he recognized Morton's broad-brimmed hat. The posse had found their trail. Taeyeon's hand tightened on his rifle stock as he counted the riders. 8 men, all armed, all determined. They would not be as easy to convince as the ranchers. The trial ahead would test everything he had learned in his years of tracking. Only this time, he was the quarry. Inside the shack, Naya was humming softly as she swept the floor with a branch of sagebrush. Her simple dream of a school where children could learn together seemed to hang in the air like the last drops of rain. Despite himself, Taeyeon felt his hardened heart shift slightly. Like stone worn smooth by persistent water, he watched the riders until they disappeared into a draw, then returned inside to prepare for what was coming. They would need all their strength and cunning for the days ahead. But for now, in this moment of quiet, Naya's hope had planted an unexpected seed in the barren ground of his soul. The night wrapped around them like a damp blanket as they pushed onward, leaving the line shack behind. Taeyeon led them deeper into the rising terrain where pine forests grew thick and Morton's men would have trouble following. The horses picked their way carefully through the darkness, their hooves silent on the carpet of pine needles. Dawn found them high in the foothills. Naya had not complained, but Taeyeon saw how she swayed in her saddle, her face pale with exhaustion. When she nearly slipped from her mount for the 3rd time, he pulled his horse alongside hers. "Enough," he said gruffly. "You will fall and break your neck." Before she could protest, he lifted her from her saddle and settled her in front of him on his own horse. Her head drooped against his chest as soon as she was secure. He tied her sorrel mare's reins to his saddle horn and guided them down toward a valley he remembered from his scouting days. The morning mist was just burning off when they descended into the sheltered vale. Through the thinning fog, Taeyeon spotted the remains of an old mission church. Adobe walls rose against the mountainside, their white paint long faded to patchy gray. A wooden cross, weathered but still standing, topped the bell tower. As they approached, movement caught his eye. A tall figure emerged from the church door, a white man in a black coat, his gray hair wild as if he had been running his hands through it. He carried a worn Bible in one hand and a rifle in the other. "That's far enough," the man called out. Though he held his rifle pointed at the ground, Taeha and reined in, keeping Naya sheltered behind his broad shoulder. "We seek only rest," he said carefully. "The girl is exhausted." The man, clearly a preacher, by his dress, studied them with tired eyes. "I am Eli Barnes," he said finally. "This is my mission. What's left of it?" Naya stirred at the sound of voices. "Please," she said softly, "might you spare some bread? We have not eaten since yesterday." Something in her gentle request seemed to soften the preacher's wary stance. He lowered his rifle entirely and gestured toward the church. "Come inside, both of you. I have cornbread and coffee, at least." The mission's interior was cool and dim. Dust motes danced in the shafts of morning light that penetrated the high windows. Eli Barnes led them to what had once been the church parlor, now serving as his living quarters. A pot of coffee simmered on a small stove in the corner. "Sit, sit," he urged, pulling out rough wooden chairs. He busied himself cutting thick slices of cornbread and pouring coffee into tin cups. Naya ate slowly, with the careful manners that spoke of her mission school training. Tyon remained standing, watching the preacher while keeping one eye on the windows. "You're running from something?" Eli said finally. It wasn't a question. Tyon's hand tightened on his rifle, but Naya spoke. "First, the sheriff," she said. "He held me and other girls captive, saying it was legal, but it was not right. Sheriff Morton." Eli's face darkened. "I know of his practices. Taking in strays, he calls it, claiming it's all proper under territorial law." The preacher's voice held bitter knowledge. He rose suddenly and went to an old chest in the corner. "I've kept records, treaties, documents, things that might matter someday." He began rifling through papers, muttering to himself. "Here," he said at last, pulling out several yellowed sheets. "The latest treaty with the Comanche nations. It specifically forbids taking captives for any purpose, including supposed debt payment or legal seizure." His hands shook slightly as he read. "Morton's actions are unlawful. They always have been." Tyon moved closer to examine the papers. "This changes nothing," he said. "Morton will not stop hunting us because of writing on paper." Eli's shoulders slumped. "No, he won't. The girl represents bounty to him, money he thinks he's owed. He'll keep coming." The day passed slowly in the cool shelter of the mission. Eli shared what food he had, speaking little but watching them with growing compassion. As evening approached, he insisted they stay the night. "The parlor isn't much, but it's safer than the open mountain," he said. "I can keep watch." When darkness fell, Eli lit a single lamp and opened his Bible. The yellow light cast long shadows on the adobe walls as his voice filled the room with ancient words. "Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked." Tyon stood in the darkened doorway, the words striking him like physical blows. How long had he turned away from such ideas, believing justice was nothing but a story told to children? Yet here he was defending this girl, as if some part of him still believed. Naya sat cross-legged on her borrowed blanket, her face glowing in the lamplight as she listened to the psalm. Her hands were folded in her lap, the small cross still hanging at her throat. Despite everything, her faith remained unshaken in God, in justice, in the possibility of a better world. Eli's voice grew stronger as he continued reading, the words echoing off the high ceiling. Tyon felt something stir in his chest, an emotion. He had long buried hope, perhaps, or the memory of hope. The preacher finally closed his Bible and looked at them both. "Rest now," he said softly. "Tomorrow will bring its own trials." Tyon nodded, knowing the truth of those words. Outside, a coyote called in the darkness, its cry echoing off the valley walls. Somewhere out there, Morton and his men were still searching. But for this moment, in this sanctuary of crumbling adobe and ancient psalms, they had found a brief peace. Naya was already curled up on her blanket, her breathing deep and even. Tyon settled himself by the door, rifle across his knees, and prepared for another long night of watching. But Eli's words kept running through his mind. Defend the weak. Uphold the cause of the poor. Perhaps justice was not dead after all. Perhaps it lived in moments like this, in a preacher's courage to shelter fugitives, in a girl's unwavering faith, in his own choice to stand against what he knew was wrong. Before the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, Tyon gently woke Naya. She rose without a word, understanding the need for silence. Eli Barnes met them at the mission door, pressing a small bundle of cornbread into Naya's hands. "I will search through more records," the preacher whispered. "There may be other documents that could help. I will find you if I can." His weathered face was earnest in the fading starlight. Tyon clasped the man's hand briefly. "We are grateful," he said, his voice low. The two horses stood ready, their breath creating small clouds in the cool mountain air. They rode out as the first birds, began their morning songs. Tyone led them higher into the mountains, following game trails that wound through stands of pine and aspen. The air grew thinner and cooler as they climbed. Naya sat straighter in her saddle today, restored by the night's rest and Eli's hospitality. Near midday, Tyone suddenly reined in, his body tensing. Naya followed his gaze to a ridge above them where several mounted figures had appeared, their forms dark against the bright sky. Warriors by their bearing and Apache by their dress. "Stay close," Tyone murmured to Naya. He recognized these hunters, his own people, whom he had not seen in many seasons. At their head rode a tall figure he knew too well, Nawal, his mother's brother, now grown gray, but still sitting his horse like a young brave. The hunting party descended toward them, weapons ready but not drawn. Nawal's face was stern as he approached, his eyes hard as they fell on Tyone. "So," the elder said in Apache, "the army scout returns." The words carried old bitterness. Uncle Tyone acknowledged, keeping his voice steady despite the ache of remembered shame. "I seek shelter for the girl." Nawal's gaze shifted to Naya. "A Comanche," he observed. "Why do you travel with her?" Before Tyone could answer, Naya urged her horse forward. "Respected elder," she said in careful Apache, surprising them all, "I beg protection. A corrupt sheriff hunts us, one who takes captives against the law." Nawal's eyebrows rose slightly at her use of his language. The other warriors murmured among themselves, studying the strange pair before them. "You speak our tongue?" Nawal asked. A little Naya replied, "I learned from other captives." "Please, we ask only one night's rest," the old warrior considered them both for a long moment. Wind stirred the eagle feather in his hair as he weighed his decision. Finally, he nodded once, grudgingly. "One night," he said, "for the girl's sake, not yours, nephew." They followed the hunting party to a sheltered camp nestled in a high meadow. Women moved among the lodges, smoke rising from cooking fires. Children stopped their play to stare at the newcomers, especially Naya in her settler's dress. Two older women approached as they dismounted. Without a word, they took Naya's hands and led her toward one of the lodges. Tyone watched, tense, until he saw their gentle manner with her. They would care for her as one of their own, at least for this night. He turned to find Nawal studying him. "You were a warrior once," his uncle said, "before you chose to serve the white man's army." "I had my reasons," Tyone replied stiffly. "Yes, always reasons." Nawal's voice held decades of disappointment. "Come, you will share my fire, though you may not deserve it." As evening approached, Tyone saw Naya emerge from the women's lodge. They had dressed her in a soft deerskin dress and wrapped a beautifully woven blanket around her shoulders. Her long hair had been brushed until it shone, decorated with small shells that clicked softly when she moved. She looked more at peace than he had seen her since freeing her from the auction platform. The women had laid out supper, dried meat, pine nuts, and flatbread. As they ate, Nawal spoke of troubles in the territory. "This sheriff who hunts you, we know of him," the elder said. "His greed is for more than captives. He seeks the water rights to Comanche lands." He looked meaningfully at Naya. "Your people's waters grow scarce in summer. Their hunting grounds shrink. Morton would take what little remains." Tyone's hands tightened on his tin cup. "How does he claim such rights?" "Through papers, contracts, signed under threat." Nawal's face darkened. "Some say he holds captives until their leaders agree to sign." Naya drew her blanket closer, her voice quiet but clear. "My uncle spoke of such papers before Morton's men took me. He refused to sign." Night settled over the camp. Stars emerged in the deep blue sky, bright and countless as scattered beads. Most of the band had retired to their lodges, leaving Tyone and Naya beside the dying fire. She sat close to him, comfortable in his presence in a way that still surprised him. "Brother of the mountains," she said softly, using the name in her own language. He looked down at her, questioning. "That is what I call you in my heart," she explained, "because you are strong like the mountains, and you shelter me as they shelter all who seek refuge." The simple words touched something deep in Taeon's spirit. For so long he had carried the weight of his choices to scout for the army, to turn away from his people's ways. He had accepted their judgment of betrayal, wearing his shame like a second skin. But here, in this moment, Naya's trust and the kindness of the women who had tended her stirred ancient feelings of belonging. For the first time in years, he felt pride in who he was. Not the army scout, not the exile, but a warrior who had chosen to defend the innocent. The star-filled sky seemed to bear witness as something shifted in his heart. Shame giving way to a fiercer emotion, determination to be worthy of his new name. Brother of the mountains. Naywell appeared silently beside them, his face softened somewhat by the firelight. "Sleep now," he told them. "Tomorrow you must leave, but tonight you rest under Apache stars." He paused, then added quietly, "My sister would be proud, nephew, that you protect this child." Taeon watched his uncle walk away, those unexpected words echoing in his mind. Beside him, Naya had already drifted to sleep, secure in the safety of the camp and his presence. The night wind carried the scent of pine and sage, familiar smells of home that he had almost forgotten in the distance. A wolf called to its pack, their song echoing off the mountainsides. Taeon settled back against his saddle, rifle close at hand, but his heart lighter than it had been in many moons. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but tonight they had found shelter among his people. It was, he realized, more than he had dared to hope for. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold when the first shot cracked across the camp. The bullet splintered a lodgepole near where Taeon stood, checking his horse's cinch. His warrior instincts, honed by years of scouting, sent him diving for cover behind a stack of firewood. "Riders?" came the shout from the sentries. Many riders. More gunfire erupted from the ridgeline. Through the morning mist, Taeon counted at least 15 mounted men, Morton's posse, led by the sheriff himself. They charged down the slope. Revolvers blazing Naya. Taeon bellowed, scanning frantically for the girl. He spotted her being pulled to safety by the Apache women, ducking into a sturdy lodge. Good, now he could fight. Nowell's voice rang out sharp commands in Apache. Warriors scrambled for weapons, taking positions behind rocks and trees. Some returned fire with old army rifles, while others knocked arrows to their bows. Taha and snatched up his own. Bow, a weapon he trusted more than any gun. In one fluid motion. Learned in childhood, he drew and loosed. His arrow found its mark in the chest of a rider, who tumbled from his saddle with a cry. The man's horse bolted, creating chaos in the posse's charge. Morton's voice carried over the gunfire. "Take them all. The girl and the traitor are mine." A bullet went past Taeon's ear. He rolled behind a boulder, drew again, and sent another arrow flying. This one struck a second rider in the shoulder, not a killing shot, but enough to remove him from the fight. The Apache warriors moved like smoke through the trees, firing and falling back, drawing the posse into a deadly maze of crossfire. But Morton's men were well armed, and their bullets chipped bark and stone all around the camp. Tan darted from cover to cover, closing distance. He had dropped his bow, drawing his knife instead. The blade had been his father's, its steel proven. In many fights, at close range, he would make it sing again. He never saw the shot that took him. Fire erupted in his side, spinning him halfway around. His hand came away from his ribs, red with blood. Through a haze of pain, he saw Morton grinning, gun barrel smoking. But before the sheriff could fire again, Nawal's war cry split the air. The old warrior led a charge that sent the posse reeling back. Bullets met arrows in a storm of death. Morton's horse reared as an arrow grazed its flank. The sheriff fought to control his mount, cursing. "This isn't finished." Morton shouted as he wheeled his horse around. "I'll be back with twice the men. That girl belongs to me by law." The remaining riders followed their leader in retreat, leaving 2 dead behind. Their hoofbeats faded into the forest as the sun cleared the mountains. Tyone. Naya's voice trembled as she ran to where he knelt, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. She dropped beside him, her fingers gentle as they pulled his shirt away from the wound. "Not deep," he grunted, though the pain said otherwise. The bullet passed through. "Be still," she ordered, sounding older than her 17 years. The Apache women brought clean cloths and healing herbs. Naya worked with quiet efficiency, cleaning and binding the wound as Tayon fought to stay conscious. "You must rest," she insisted when she finished. "Let them carry you to the lodge." Tayon shook his head, gritting his teeth as he forced himself to stand. The world swam before his eyes, but he locked his knees, refusing to fall. "I must stay ready. He will return." Nawal appeared at his nephew's side, steadying him with a strong hand. The old warrior's face showed new respect as he studied Tayon. "You fought well," Nawal said simply. "Your arrows flew true." Tayon met his uncle's eyes, seeing the decades of distrust beginning to crumble. "I fight for what matters now," he replied as darkness fell. The Apache gathered around the central fire. Women tended the wounded 3 warriors had taken bullets, though none as seriously as Tayon. The dead attackers had been buried with basic honors. For even enemies deserved that much. Nawal's deep voice rose in a warrior's chant, singing of brave deeds and spilled blood. Other voices joined his, the ancient songs echoing off the mountainsides. Tayon sat wrapped in blankets, his side throbbing in time with the drums. Naya nestled close to him, her head resting against his shoulder. The singing continued as Naya crossed to where they sat. The old warrior knelt before his nephew, studying him with eyes that had seen many seasons of war and peace. "I was wrong about you," Nawal said at last. "You left us to scout for the army, and I called it betrayal. But today I saw your heart. You fight like your father did for what is right." He gripped Tayon's shoulder. "Blood stands taller than shame, nephew. You are Apache still." Tayon's throat tightened at the words he had longed to hear. He pressed his forehead to his uncle's in the gesture of kinship, feeling the weight of exile finally lift from his spirit. The fire burned lower, as the songs gave way to quiet talk. Most of the band sought their lodges, leaving Tayon and Naya alone by the flames. Wind moaned through the pines, carrying the promise of storm. "I heard what Morton shouted," Naya said softly. "He will come back." "Yes." Tayon shifted, wincing at the pain in his side. "I will not leave you," she whispered fiercely. "You are my family now, my brother of the mountains." Tayon looked down at her young face, seeing both determination and trust. Something powerful stirred in his chest, a feeling he had not known since his sister died years ago. He was more than just Naya's protector now. He had become a father to her in all but blood. The wind rose stronger, driving clouds across the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, Morton and his men were planning their return. But here, in this moment, surrounded by the warmth of renewed kinship, Tayon felt ready to face whatever came. His wound would heal. His spirit already had. Thunder growled in the distance as the storm approached. Naya dozed against him, secure. Despite the threatening weather, Tayon stayed awake, watching the fire dance, listening to the wind carry Morton's promise of vengeance through the night. Dark clouds rolled over the mountains, bringing the first bitter winds of winter. Snow began falling in thick, wet flakes that clung to the pine branches and blanketed the Apache camp. Tayon watched from the doorway of the lodge, one hand pressed to his healing wound. The bullet hole still burned, a constant reminder of Morton's. Attack. Inside the lodge, Naya worked alongside the Apache women, her quick hands learning their ancient skills. She knelt before a stretched deer hide, scraping it clean with practiced strokes. Her dark hair was tied back with a leather strip, and her face showed deep concentration. "Like this?" she asked Two Rivers, the eldest of the women. The grandmother nodded approval. Good smooth strokes. The hide must be clean before tanning. Tayon felt pride warm his chest. In just days, Naya had won the respect of the band. She worked without complaint, eager to learn their ways. The women had taken to calling her little sister, treating her as one of their own. The aroma of venison. Stew filled the lodge. Another pot bubbled nearby, where Naya was learning to cook the traditional way. She had mastered the right mix of herbs, the proper timing of adding roots and meat. Even Nawal had praised her cooking the night before. As evening approached, the band gathered in the main lodge. Snow whistled outside, while inside, the fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. Nawal sat in the place of honor, his weathered face grave as he spoke of the past. "These treaties," he said, holding up brittle papers, "were signed when our people were desperate. Morton and others like him waited until drought struck, until our children cried from hunger. Then they came with papers promising food and water." Wright's Tayon listened intently. He had heard fragments of this history during his army years, but never the full truth. They wrote words we could not read. Nawal continued, made promises they never meant to keep. Now Morton uses these false papers to steal more land, more water, more lives. His eyes met Tayon's. This is why he hunts the girl. Her people hold the last good water rights he covets. A commotion outside interrupted his words. Warriors moved to defend the camp, but the visitor was alone, Eli Barnes, snow-covered and exhausted. Leading his horse through the storm, the preacher carried a leather satchel close to his chest. His eyes were haunted as he entered the lodge, nodding respectfully to Nawal. Snow melted from his coat as he settled near the fire. "I had to come," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I carry a heavy burden that must be shared." Naya brought him a cup of hot tea, which he accepted with trembling hands. The lodge fell silent, waiting. "I too signed papers for Morton," Eli confessed, pulling documents from his satchel. 5 years ago, when drought killed my crops and sickened my cattle, he offered water rights if I would just sign as witness to other agreements." The preacher's voice broke. "I knew they were wrong, but I was weak. My signature helped him steal." Comanche water rights. Tayon watched Naya's face, expecting anger. Instead, she knelt beside the preacher and took his hand. "You speak truth now," she said softly. "That takes courage." Eli's eyes filled with tears. "How can you forgive so easily, child?" "Because hate solves nothing," she replied. "Your voice can help make things right." The preacher squared his shoulders, finding strength in her words. "These papers prove Morton's deception. If we take them to town, show the people how he's corrupted the law. Townsfolk won't listen to savages." Tayon cut in, bitter experience coloring his words. "They see only what they wish to see." "They'll listen to me," Eli insisted. "I'm still their preacher. When I confess my part and show the evidence, others who signed under pressure may find courage to speak to." Nawal studied the preacher thoughtfully. "Words alone cannot fight guns." Eli agreed. "But truth has power when spoken boldly. The town must choose follow Morton's corruption or stand for justice." Snow continued falling through the night as they discussed possibilities. Tayon remained skeptical, but Naya's quiet certainty began to sway him. She believed truth and faith could change hearts. Looking at how she had already changed his own heart, he couldn't deny her wisdom. The storm lasted 3 days, keeping them all close to the lodges. Tyone used the time to teach Naya's survival skills. Though his wound still pained him, he showed her how to string a bow, how to nock an arrow properly. "Draw to your cheek," he instructed, adjusting her grip. "Let the bowstring touch your nose. Good. Now breathe out slowly as you release." Her first arrows flew wide, but she refused to quit. Hour after hour she practiced, even after her fingers blistered. By the 4th day, she was hitting the target consistently. "Watch," she called to him that afternoon. The snow had finally stopped, leaving the world crisp and white. Naya drew the bow smoothly, aimed, and loosed. Her arrow struck dead center of the target. A rare smile crossed Taeyeon's face. "Well done, little sister." She beamed at the praise, then grew serious. "I pray I never need these skills against people. But I will defend our family if I must." Our family. The words settled warm in Taeyeon's chest. Somehow this brave girl had brought him home, had helped heal the breach with his people. Looking around the camp, he saw not just faces, but kin, Nawal's quiet strength, the women's gentle wisdom, the warriors' steady loyalty. That evening, as the band shared dinner, Eli spoke of his plans to return to town. "The snow has stopped. We should move soon, before Morton gathers more men." Taeyeon nodded reluctantly. His wound was healing well enough for travel. They had delayed as long as they dared. Naiwal rose to address them all. "My warriors will ride with you. Truth must be defended." He looked at Taeyeon and Naya with pride. "You are our blood now. Where you go, we go." Naya's eyes shone with tears as she hugged the women who had become her teachers and sisters. They gifted her with a beautifully beaded medicine pouch, marking her as one of their own. The fire crackled low as the lodge slowly emptied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were simply family, bound by something stronger than treaties or law. Taeyeon watched Naya practicing her bow once more in the fading light. Her movements sure and graceful. She had entered his life as a stranger, become his sister, and transformed into a daughter of his heart. Whatever justice they sought in town, he knew this was the greatest gift: to belong, to protect, to love. The evening star appeared above the snowy peaks as Naya finally set aside her bow. She settled next to Taeyeon, sharing the comfortable silence of family. Their path ahead was uncertain, but they would face it together. The morning sun glinted off fresh snow as the group prepared to leave the Apache camp. Taeyeon checked their provisions, while Naya helped the women pack dried meat and medicine bundles. The path down from the mountains would be treacherous, but clearer skies promised safe passage. Nawal stood at the edge of camp, his eyes scanning the distant valleys. "The snow has stopped, but danger has not," he said, turning to Taeyeon. "Morton will have men watching the trails." "We understand the risk," Taeyeon replied, adjusting the straps on his horse's saddle. Naiwal nodded gravely. "You will not ride alone. 6 of my best warriors will guard your path." He gestured to where mounted Apache warriors waited, weapons ready. Eli Barnes mounted his own horse, treaty documents secured safely in his saddlebags. "God willing, we'll reach town before Morton can gather his forces." The band gathered to bid farewell. Women embraced Naya, pressing small gifts into her hands: a beaded bracelet, a woven blanket, dried herbs for healing. Their acceptance warmed Taeyeon's heart. His people had become her people too. They set out as the sun climbed higher, following a narrow trail that wound down through pine forests. Fresh snow crunched under the horses' hooves. Apache warriors rode ahead and behind, alert for any sign of threat. Near midday, they heard sounds of distress carrying up the trail. Rounding a bend, they came upon a settler family struggling with their broken wagon. One wheel had cracked, spilling their belongings across the snow. A woman tried to comfort two crying children while her husband fought to lift the heavy wagon bed. "We should ride past," Tyon muttered. "It's not safe to linger." But Naya was already dismounting. "They need help," she said firmly. "We cannot leave them stranded in the cold." Tyon started to argue, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. With a resigned sigh, he swung down from his horse. The settler family froze at their approach, fear plain on their faces. "Let us help," Naya said gently to the woman. She knelt beside the children, pulling a strip of dried fruit from her bag. The little ones stopped crying, watching her with wide eyes as she shared the sweet treat. Tyon and two Apache warriors approached the wagon. The settler man stepped back nervously, but Tyon simply pointed to the broken wheel. "Together," he said. "We lift, you guide the new wheel in place." Working as one, they managed to raise the heavy wagon while the settler fitted a spare wheel. Eli and the other warriors kept watch, but the trail remained quiet. When the wagon was fixed, the settler woman approached Naya. I thank you," she said hesitantly. "When we heard about a Comanche girl in these parts, I feared you were wild, dangerous, but I see now you have a kind heart." Naya smiled. "We are all God's children," she replied. "My dream is to build a school where all children can learn together, Comanche and settler alike." The woman's face softened. She reached into her wagon and pulled out a warm loaf of bread, pressing it into Naya's hands. "God bless you, child. May your dream come true." As they rode on, Tyon noticed Naya's quiet smile. Even this small moment of understanding gave her hope. The settlers' gratitude might spread word that not all Indians were to be feared by evening. They made camp in a deep canyon that offered shelter from wind and unwanted eyes. Rock walls rose high on either side, and a small stream provided fresh water. The Apache warriors set guards while Eli started a fire. They shared the settler woman's bread with their dried meat. Its warmth welcome after the cold day's ride. As darkness fell, stars appeared in the narrow strip of sky above the canyon walls. Naya sat close to the fire, its light dancing across her face as she spoke of her dream. "The schoolhouse will have bright walls," she said, eyes shining yellow like summer sun. "Windows will let in light all day long." "Tell us more," Eli encouraged, settling back against his saddle. "Children will sit together, Comanche and settler, side by side. They will learn reading and writing, numbers and history." Her voice grew animated, and there will be singing. Hymns in English and Comanche both, lifting up to heaven together. "A beautiful vision," Eli said softly. "The Lord surely smiles on such a dream of peace." Tyon lay back against the canyon wall, watching Naya through the flames. Her face glowed with hope as she described gardens where children would grow vegetables together, and a bell that would ring out welcome to all. The fire cast her shadow large against the rock, as if already showing the teacher she might become. But even as her sweet voice painted pictures of harmony, Tyon felt a darker shadow approaching. Somewhere out there, Morton plotted their destruction. The sheriff would never allow his crimes to be exposed, his power challenged. The very beauty of Naya's dream made it dangerous to those who profited from hatred and fear. One of the Apache guards appeared silently at the edge of firelight. "All quiet," he reported, "but there is smoke from many campfires in the valley below." Morton gathers his men. Tyon nodded grimly. Tomorrow they would descend into danger, carrying truth to confront corruption. He watched Naya demonstrate a Comanche children's counting game to Eli, her hands dancing in the firelight. Her innocent strength had already begun changing hearts. Perhaps there was hope after all. The fire crackled low as night deepened in the canyon. Guards kept their vigil, while others sought rest for the trials ahead. Naya curled up in her blanket near Tahan, humming softly, a melody that mingled Comanche tradition with Christian hymn. The sound echoed gently off the canyon walls, as if the very rocks were learning to sing in harmony. After days of hard riding, the company crested a final ridge overlooking Los Trigos. The winter sun hung low in the afternoon sky, casting long shadows across the valley. Tian reined his horse to a stop, scanning the familiar landscape below. Something was wrong. Dark smoke rose from the direction of the line shack where he and Naya had first found shelter. One of Noel's scouts rode up swiftly, his face grim. Morton's men, the scout reported. They burned the shack to ashes. Nothing remains. Naya's sharp intake of breath drew Taeyeon's attention. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at the distant smoke. That humble shack had been their first refuge together, where she had gathered sagebrush for kindling and shared her dream of a school. Now it was gone. Why? She whispered. Why destroy an empty shelter? To show his power, Taeyeon answered quietly. To prove nowhere is safe from him. Eli Barnes moved his horse closer, placing a gentle hand on Naya's shoulder. The Lord is our shelter now, child. Morton can burn buildings, but he cannot touch our spirit. Before Taeyeon could respond, to more Apache scouts appeared from the east, riding hard. Their news struck like a physical blow. Morton's men had captured 3 elders from Noel's band, including the medicine woman who had tended Taeyeon's wounds. Noel's face turned to stone. When? Before dawn, one scout replied. They came with many guns. The elders were gathering winter herbs in the lower meadows. Morton holds them in the town jail. Taeyeon's chest tightened with guilt. He had brought this trouble to his people. By seeking their protection, he had made them targets for Morton's revenge. He looked at his uncle, expecting anger, but Nawal's eyes held only determination. This changes nothing. Nawal declared. We face him tomorrow at dawn, as planned. Now we fight not just for truth, but for our people's freedom. They made camp that night in a protected hollow, close enough to see the town's lights, but hidden from view. The Apache warriors moved like shadows, setting guards and preparing for morning's confrontation. Eli Barnes spent hours reviewing the treaty documents, marking key passages that proved Morton's deceptions as darkness settled. Taeyeon sat alone by the fire, his thoughts heavy with responsibility. The flames cast dancing shadows across his scarred hands, hands that had both served the army and protected Naya. Hands that tomorrow must find justice without bloodshed. Eli approached, carrying his worn Bible. May I join you, brother? Taeyeon nodded, making room on the log where he sat. The preacher opened his Bible to a marked page, the firelight catching the gold-edged papers. Listen to these words, Eli said softly. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. Fine words, Taeyeon replied. But tomorrow we face guns and greed, not God's army. The battle between right and wrong is always God's fight, Eli countered. You protect the innocent. Seek justice for the oppressed. The Lord stands with such. Causes, their quiet discussion was interrupted by Naya's approach. She carried something small in her hands, carefully woven from threads and beads during their journey. Brother of the mountains, she said, using her special name for Taeyeon. I made this for you. She held out a bracelet, crafted from dark and light beads in a pattern of mountains and stars. Taeyeon accepted it carefully, the firelight catching. The intricate design. His throat tightened at this unexpected gift. So you never fight alone, Naya explained, her voice strong despite her youth. When you wear it, remember, you carry all our hopes. Mine, Eli's, the Apache people's, even the Settlers who dream of peace. With deliberate care, Tayan slipped the bracelet over his wrist. The beads felt warm against his skin, like a physical reminder of Naya's unwavering faith in him. He held her words in his heart like a sacred vow. The night deepened around their camp. Most of the company sought rest, knowing dawn would bring challenge. Tayan took the first watch, standing at the edge of their hidden hollow. The town's lights glimmered below like earthbound stars. Then he heard it, the distant thunder of hoofbeats. Many horses moving in the darkness. Morton's men preparing for tomorrow's confrontation. The sound echoed off the valley walls, a reminder. That morning would bring either justice or destruction. Nawal appeared silently beside him, his weathered face serious in the starlight. "The elders say a storm is coming," he murmured. "Not of rain, but of men's choices. Tomorrow we learn if truth can overcome hatred." Tayan touched the bracelet at his wrist, feeling each carefully placed bead. "Whatever comes," he replied, "we face it together." From the camp behind them came the soft sound of Naya's voice, singing a prayer in mixed Comanche and English words. The melody drifted out across the dark valley, a gentle counterpoint to the ominous hoofbeats below. The night wind carried the scent of burning sage, perhaps from the destroyed line shack, perhaps from Morton's men making camp. Tayan breathed it in, remembering Naya gathering the herb that first day. So much had changed since then. Tomorrow would bring even greater change, for good or ill. Or ill. More hoofbeats echoed in the darkness. Morton's forces were gathering strength. But Tayan stood firm, the weight of Naya's bracelet on his wrist, Eli's scripture in his mind, and his people's strength at his back. Dawn would find them ready. The pale winter sun crept over the eastern mountains, painting Los Trigos in shades of gold and shadow. Frost still clung to the wooden boardwalks as Tayan led their group toward the town square. Naya rode close beside him, her back straight despite her fear. Behind them came Eli Barnes on his tired bay horse, treaty papers tucked safely in his saddlebags. Nawal's warriors spread out in a protective arc, their presence drawing townsfolk from their homes and businesses. The square filled quickly with murmuring people. Women clutched shawls against the morning chill. Men shifted uneasily, hands never far from their belts. Children peered around skirts and doorways, eyes wide at the sight of so many Apache warriors in their midst. Sheriff Morton stood on the same wooden platform where he had once displayed Naya for auction. This time, 3 elderly Apache sat bound. Before him, 2 men and a woman, their dignified faces showing no fear despite their chains. The medicine woman who had tended Tayan's wounds met his gaze steadily, her quiet strength unchanged by captivity. "Good people of Los Trigos," Morton called out, his voice carrying across the square. These raiders were caught stealing from honest settlers. The law demands justice. A ripple of uncertainty passed through the crowd. Tayan noticed some settlers from the broken wagon among them, the same folks Naya had insisted on helping. They looked troubled by Morton's words. Before anyone could respond, 2 of Morton's deputies dragged Naya from her horse. She fought them, but they forced heavy shackles around her wrists and pulled her onto the platform. The sight of her in chains again made Tayan's blood run cold. Morton grabbed Naya's arm, displaying her like a prize. "This one, too, an escaped prisoner of the law. This is justice." "No." Tayan's voice boomed across the square as he dismounted. His massive frame seemed to fill the space as he strode forward. Treaty documents held high. "This is fraud." The crowds murmuring grew louder. Morton's face darkened with rage, but Tayan continued, his words deliberate and clear. "These papers prove the truth. The sheriff's bounties are false." His contracts steal water rights through lies. Taon's scars stood stark against his skin as he faced the townspeople. Naya is no captive. She is free under law and treaty. Listen to the outlaw Apache, Morton sneered. A savage who breaks our laws, steals our property, now claims to read treaties. He spat in the dust. Who will you believe, your sheriff or this desert criminal? The crowd shifted uneasily. Doubt crept into their faces as they looked between Morton's badge and Taon's scarred visage. Years of fear and prejudice warred with growing suspicion of the sheriff's claims. Eli Barnes urged his horse forward then, his clerical collar bright. In the morning sun, I will speak to the truth, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of his calling. I myself signed false papers under Morton's pressure. Water rights stolen from native peoples through threats and lies. Gasps rippled. Through the gathering, Morton's face twisted with fury, but Eli continued, holding up his own documents. I bear witness to my shame in this. I put my name to theft because I was afraid. But God demands we speak truth, even when it costs us. The preacher's voice grew stronger. Morton's bounties are built on deceit. The raids, he claims, are his. Own men driving people from their rightful lands. Lies. Morton roared. This treacherous preacher conspires with savages. But his words were drowned out by a woman's cry from the crowd. Sarah Mitchell, wife of the largest rancher in the valley, pushed forward. Her face was flushed with anger as she pointed at Morton. Our well went dry 3 months past, she declared. You said it was Apache raids stealing our water. But it was you, wasn't it? You diverted the stream to sell water rights you never owned. More voices joined hers. The settler woman whose wagon Naya had helped repair spoke up about missing cattle Morton blamed on raiders. A shopkeeper described threats to his family when he questioned water fees. The dam of fear broke, releasing years of suspicious whispers into open accusations. Morton's hand dropped to his revolver. This is insurrection, he snarled. I am the law here. You are a thief who hides behind a badge, Tahan replied, his voice cutting through the growing chaos. The morning sun caught the beaded bracelet at his wrist. Naya's gift of courage and hope. The sheriff's gun cleared its holster with practiced speed. One more word, Apache, and I'll put you down like the dog you are. But the crowd's mood had shifted. They pressed closer to the platform, faces hard with newfound resolve. Morton's deputies looked uncertain, no longer sure whose side held justice. Noble's warriors remained steady. Arrows knocked, but not drawn. They watched the townspeople find their courage with quiet approval. The captured elders sat straighter, dignity unbroken by their bonds. Eli Barnes raised his Bible high. Choose this day whom you will serve, he called out. Truth or lies, justice or tyranny. God sees all our choices. The square hummed with tension. Morton's finger tightened on his trigger. Taon stood unmoved, treaty papers still held high. While Naya's chains rattled in the morning wind, the crack of Morton's revolver shattered the morning silence. His shot, aimed at Eli Barnes, sparked chaos across the square. Ka lunged sideways, shoving the preacher down as the bullet grazed his own shoulder. Blood darkened his shirt sleeve, but he remained standing, a mountain unmoved. Protect the townsfolk. Noel's voice thundered over the pandemonium. His warriors surged forward, arrows whistling through the air. Morton's deputies scattered, diving for cover behind water troughs and wagon wheels. Some dropped their weapons, hands raised in surrender. The square erupted into mayhem. Women screamed, children ran for doorways, and horses reared in their traces. But not everyone fled. Sarah Mitchell grabbed a fallen deputy's rifle, taking aim at Morton's men. The settler family Naya had helped join the fray. the husband wrestling one of Morton's loyalists to the ground while his wife swung a length of broken wagon wheel. On the platform, Naya seized her moment. She kicked backward hard, her heel catching her guard in the knee. He stumbled, losing his grip on her chains. She twisted free, the loose shackles clanking against wood as she rolled away from his grasp. Her dark eyes found Taeon through the chaos, and she ran to him. "Your arm," she gasped, steadying his weight as he raised his rifle. Blood trickled down his sleeve, but his aim held true. Morton fired again, the bullet splintering wood near Eli's head. But Taeon's shot rang out clean and precise, striking the sheriff's revolver. The weapon flew from Morton's grip, clattering. Across the platform boards, the sheriff howled in rage and pain, clutching his stinging hand. "Take him!" Someone shouted from the crowd. No more tyranny. The tide turned in an instant. Townspeople who had cowered under Morton's rule for years surged forward. Sarah Mitchell's husband vaulted onto the platform, tackling the sheriff before he could reach for his backup gun. 3 ranch hands joined him, pinning Morton down despite his struggles. "Get those elders free." Eli called out, already working at the Apache captive's chains with shaking hands. 2 shopkeepers rushed to help, producing keys taken from surrendered. Deputies. Women from the crowd converged around Naya, their faces tight with shame and determination. Martha Webb, the settler wife whose wagon they had fixed, wrapped her own shawl around the girl's shoulders. "You poor child," she murmured, smoothing Naya's wind-tangled hair. "No more chains. Never again." The sheriff thrashed and cursed as men dragged him down from his platform. Blood ran from his nose where someone's fist had found its mark. His fine coat was torn, his badge ripped away. They hauled him toward the same jail where he had locked so many innocent people. "You can't do this." Morton spat blood onto the dirt. "I am the law." "The law serves justice," Eli Barnes replied, his voice carrying across the now quieting square. "You served only greed." The last of Morton's loyal deputies surrendered, surrounded by Nawal's warriors. The morning wind caught papers scattered. In the fight, false contracts and bounty notices, swirling like dead leaves across the bloody dirt. The square grew still except for murmured prayers of relief. Someone began humming Amazing Grace, the tune catching and spreading through the crowd. People added their own song of victory, the melodies weaving together in the cold air. Taeon swayed slightly, the blood loss and exhaustion finally taking their toll. His knees buckled, and he dropped to one knee in the dirt. Naya was there instantly, her small hands gripping his calloused ones. Her touch anchored him, keeping him from falling further. "Brother of mountains," she whispered, using his Apache name. "We are free. We are free." He looked up at her face, seeing not just the brave girl who had trusted him, but a future bright with possibility. Around them, settlers and Apache alike worked together to tend the wounded and restore order. The walls between their peoples, like Morton's power, had begun to crumble. Eli Barnes knelt beside them, his Bible still clutched in one hand. "Let me bind that wound," he offered, already tearing strips from his clean handkerchief. "Though I reckon the healing here goes deeper than just flesh." Sarah Mitchell appeared with water and bandages while her husband organized men to guard the jail. Martha Webb brought bread and coffee for the freed elders. Children who had hidden during the fight crept out to stare in wonder at Noel's warriors, who smiled and showed them their bows. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the frost away from the boardwalks. Its light fell on broken chains, dropped weapons, and people who had chosen, at last, to stand together for justice. Naya's grip on Taeon's hand never loosened as Eli cleaned and wrapped his wound. Her words, soft but filled with certainty, carried the weight of prophecy. "This is how we begin." In the warm afternoon sun, Noel's warriors methodically broke the chains, binding the Apache elders. The metallic clinks echoed across Los Trigos town square, each break a symbol of freedom restored. The elders stood with quiet dignity, rubbing circulation back into worn wrists. Eli Barnes climbed the weather-beaten platform where, just hours before, Morton had made his last stand. The preacher's Bible lay open in his trembling hands. Townsfolk gathered closer, drawn by his presence. Even those who had been turning away from the church these past months stepped forward, sensing the weight of the moment. "Listen," Eli's voice carried across the square. "For too long we've allowed men to twist the law for greed. But true justice belongs to God alone." He lifted his Bible higher. "In Amos, the Lord commands, 'Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream.'" Sarah Mitchell, standing near the front, wiped tears from her weathered cheeks. Other settlers nodded, their faces etched with shame and understanding. The morning's violence had stripped away their willful blindness. "My well went dry last spring," Robert Turner called out, his rancher's hat clutched in his hands. "Morton said it was natural, but now I reckon he diverted the water upstream. Used them false papers to steal from all of us." More voices joined in, each sharing tales of Morton's treachery. The sheriff had played neighbor against neighbor, settler against native, all while stealing the lifeblood of the land, its precious water. Nawal stepped forward, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "For generations, my people have been called thieves and raiders," he declared, meeting the settlers' eyes. "No more, we are not your enemies. The land has room for all who respect its ways." The townsfolk listened, really listened, perhaps for the first time. Martha Webb approached the Apache elder, offering him a tin cup of fresh water, a simple gesture heavy with meaning. Near the jail where Morton now sat confined, the temporary council offered Tayon a deputy's badge. The silver star caught the light, but Tayon shook his head. "I am no lawman," he said, his deep voice carrying across the square. "My path is to guard, to protect, not to enforce. The badge belongs to someone born of this town, someone who knows both justice and mercy." Naya stood beside him, her small hand resting on his arm. The borrowed shawl draped her shoulders like a mantle of dignity. Her eyes shone with pride and purpose as she surveyed the gathering. No longer a captive, she had become a bridge between peoples as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the square. Eli suggested they gather at the old mission. The townsfolk walked together, Apache and settler side by side, their boots raising small clouds of dust from the familiar path. The mission's adobe walls glowed, rose gold in the evening light. Wild grass grew between the flagstones, and swallows nested in the broken bell tower. But the space held a peace that transcended its ruins. Eli stood before the weathered altar, his voice stronger now. "Let us give thanks," he said, "for lives spared, for truth revealed, for walls of hatred broken down." The gathered people bowed their heads. Then, clear as a mountain stream, Naya's voice rose in song. The Comanche hymn floated through the mission. Her words strange to many ears, but the melody familiar, an old song of praise carried across the plains by missionaries long ago. Martha Webb recognized the tune and began humming along. Sarah Mitchell joined in, then others. Soon the mission rang with voices, Apache warriors, settler women, ranch hands, and elders all singing together. Some sang in English, some in Comanche, some in Apache, but the harmony bound them as one. The last rays of sunset streamed through the mission's broken windows, painting everyone in the same golden light. Children who had hidden from each other now sat together on blankets spread over stone floors. Women shared bread and stories. Men who had fought that morning now stood shoulder to shoulder in song. Tayon watched it all from the doorway. Naya still by his side. His wound ached, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. Here in this ruined church, something new was being built, not with adobe and timber, but with truth and trust. The blended voices rose to the darkening sky, carrying hope as vast as the New Mexico territory itself. In that moment, the lines that had divided them, lines drawn by fear and greed and hatred, began to fade like shadows at dawn. Winter settled over Los Trigos like a thick blanket, coating the mission grounds in pristine white. Yet, despite the cold, the sound of hammers rang through the crisp air as the schoolhouse took shape beside the old church. Rancher Turner had donated fresh-cut pine boards, their golden sap still sticky. Martha Webb and other settler women brought cloth for curtains, gathering in the mission's sheltered corners to sew while sharing stories with the Apache women. The walls rose steadily, each beam and nail a testament to shared purpose. Nowell's people shared their wisdom freely, showing how to align the logs against harsh winds and where to place windows to catch the warming sun. Their knowledge of the land once feared now served to strengthen the simple structure. Tyone worked tirelessly, his massive shoulders straining as he lifted heavy beams into place. He spoke little, but satisfaction showed in his eyes. After years of destruction as an Army scout, the act of building brought him quiet joy. His wounds had healed, leaving fresh scars that pulled less with each passing day. Naya flitted between tasks like a bright bird, her enthusiasm warming even the coldest mornings. She mixed paint in borrowed buckets, carefully coating the rough walls in soft earth tones that reminded her of desert flowers. Children gathered at the doorway, both settler and tribal youngsters watching with wide eyes as their future classroom emerged. Eli Barnes spent hours at his desk, crafting lessons that would serve all his future pupils. His Bible lay open beside primers and spelling books as he worked to weave together different ways of learning. Sometimes he paused in his writing to watch the activity outside his window, marveling at how God's grace could transform broken things into beauty. One evening, as fresh snow drifted down, Naya lit a lantern and carried it into the half-finished schoolhouse. Golden light spilled through the empty window frames, casting long shadows across the valley snow. Tyone stood in the doorway, his breath frosting in the winter air. "See how it glows?" Naya whispered, turning to him with shining eyes, like a beacon of hope. She reached for his calloused hand. "Thank you, my protector, my family." Tyone bowed, his head unable to find words for the peace that filled his heart. The lantern light caught the silver threads in his black hair as silent tears froze on his cheeks. Here, at last, was something worth protecting. Not just a building, but a queue. But a dream made real through trust and shared labor. Spring swept across Los Trigos like a gentle hand, melting winter's grip. Fresh water burbled in streams and wells that had run dry during Morton's reign. The mountain peaks still wore caps of white, but in the valley, wildflowers dotted the awakening grass. The schoolhouse stood ready, its fresh-painted walls gleaming in morning light. Inside, worn wooden benches held a rainbow of eager faces, Comanche children with bright ribbons in their hair, Apache youngsters sitting tall, and settler kids fidgeting with excitement. The mixed chatter of languages filled the room with music. Eli Barnes stood at the front, his Bible open on the new desk. "Let us begin with prayer," he said, his voice gentle. The children bowed their heads as he asked blessing on this new beginning. Naya rose next, her eyes bright with joy. She taught them a Comanche hymn, her clear voice leading theirs. The melody floated through open windows where mothers gathered, wiping tears as English and native words blended in perfect harmony. Outside, Tayon kept his post. His rifle rested easily in the crook of his arm, no longer held for battle, but as a symbol of protection. His scarred face was peaceful as he watched over his growing family. The old wounds that had driven him to Wander had finally healed. Naiwal rode in on his painted pony, silver hair gleaming. He dismounted slowly, studying the scene. His stern face softened at the sound of children's voices. He clasped Tyon's shoulder. Pride replacing old disappointment as dusk painted the sky in purple and gold. Lamplight warmed the schoolhouse windows. The children's voices rose in song once more, carrying across the plains. Nobody spoke of Morden anymore. He sat in a distant jail, waiting for justice. While a new justice bloomed here in Los Trigos, the town had found its heart at last. Mercy had conquered hatred. Faith had built bridges stronger than fear. Thank you for watching. If this one reached you, consider subscribing. I'll be back tomorrow with more meaning, more humanity.